Hello, my name is Sam Feltham. I'm the Director of the Public Health Collaboration. Now, before I hand over to Liz, who will be taking you through the Real Food Lifestyle course, I just wanted to mention that in addition to providing this course for free, we also run an online weekly lifestyle support group you can join as well. Simply go to our website at www.phcuk.org/support and you can sign up right there. Also on the website, you can find lots of free resources and projects that you can get involved in, such as Real Food Runners or even the Ambassadors Programme as well. And if you find any of our content valuable whatsoever, please do consider donating what you can, or even regularly contributing to the charity by becoming an annual member. Now, without further ado, let me hand you over to Liz.
Hello again, and welcome everyone to the 5th session in our Real Food Low Carb Lifestyle course. Just a reminder that the information contained within the course is just that. It's information and not medical advice. If you have any medical questions, then you need to speak with your GP or your nurse. So today we're going to talk about intermittent fasting, and then we're going to look deeper into the question of vegetable oils. Just before we talk about intermittent fasting, I thought I'd show you this. Eating low carb is essentially about eating real food, and real foods is ingredients. Real food doesn't have ingredients. Real food is ingredients. That's in things like meat, eggs, fish, cheese, vegetables, nuts, seeds, real ingredients. And also this, another quick reminder that what we eat makes a difference. As you can see, both of these, the biscuit or cookie and the half avocado, provide about 160 calories. But the biscuit has 22 grams of carbohydrate. This is going to cause a big spike in glucose, which will result in a huge spike in insulin. And this means that most of these calories are going to be stored as fat. What's more, because of this, your brain's going to send out a message saying, "Help, I need food, eat," and you reach for another biscuit or something else. The avocado, on the other hand, has only about a third of the quantity of carbs, but twice the fat. So this is going to keep you satiated or feeling full for much longer. It has virtually no sugar, whereas the biscuit has 11 grams of sugar. The avocado is also a good source of fiber, over 6 grams of it, and protein, twice as much as the biscuit. So choose wisely, eat real food. So what is fasting? Intermittent fasting, also known as time-restricted eating. Fasting is not the same as starving. Who can fast? Almost anybody. It's been practiced by humans for thousands of years, and several religions fast regularly. Buddhist monks fast. All Muslims fast from dawn till dusk every day for a month every year during Ramadan. The Bible too talks of the positive effects of fasting. Jesus, we're told, went into the wilderness and fasted for 40 days. Fasting is part of the Jewish faith too. There are a couple of groups for whom fasting in any form is not appropriate, and that is children and pregnant or breastfeeding women. However, just because they shouldn't fast doesn't mean that they should be eating all day long. They should try not to snack between meals and prioritize foods high in healthy fats, such as fatty meats, oily fish, moderate amounts of cheese and nuts, along with green and leafy vegetables. And of course, anyone who's taking regular medication that requires you to eat at the same time cannot fast. So why fast? Well, there are many benefits. The 5 main benefits of fasting are that it enhances insulin sensitivity. It supports your healthy blood glucose levels too. It fights inflammation in the body. It promotes heart health, including cholesterol, blood pressure, and triglycerides. It supports cognitive function and boosts weight loss. Let's look at the way many of us eat. We have breakfast, then a mid-morning snack, followed by lunch, then an afternoon break, supper, and possibly a snack during the evening too. This sawtooth effect, as we can see in the graph, keeps insulin rising and crashing, especially after sugary processed carbohydrate foods, and it leads us to feeling hungry not long after eating. So the first thing to do is reduce the impact on insulin by sticking to 3 low-carb meals a day. That way we give the insulin a break and give your body time to do things other than digest your food. If we only have lunch and dinner, the effect on insulin is reduced even further. This is often known as the 16-8 plan. You might, for instance, have lunch at midday and supper at about 8 p.m. So you're going from 8 p.m. until 12 the next day, or 16 hours in total, without eating. You might even reduce this further and have lunch at 1 o'clock and supper at 6. So you would be going 19 hours without eating. Dr. Jason Fung is an American nephrologist, which means he treats patients with kidney disease, like those on dialysis, which is the most common reason for which is type 2 diabetes. Let's just listen to him explain in very simple terms what intermittent fasting is and why it's beneficial.
So fasting is merely any time that you don't eat. So a standard fast, which everybody should be doing, should be 12 hours, which is sort of like you finish dinner at 7 at night and you eat breakfast at 7 a.m. That's a 12-hour fast. And that's where the word breakfast comes from. It's a meal that breaks your fast. You can't break your fast if you never fast. So therefore, the implication is that this is actually a part of everyday life. So you have to understand the body only exists in 2 sort of conditions. It's either in the fed state or the fasted state. So you're either eating, which is storing food energy, or you're fasting, which is you're burning food energy. It's one or the other. And you don't do both at the same time. You don't eat and burn fat at the same time, because when you eat, your body receives the instructions to store body fat because food energy is going in. So if you understand that, then you understand that, well, if you simply extend those fasting periods, then you allow your body to spend a little bit more time burning off that food energy, which is the sugar, which is making you sick and giving you diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or the fat that's sort of clogging up all your organs. You get fatty liver and fatty pancreas and all that sort of thing. So fasting is anytime you don't eat. You can simply take that sort of normal 12-hour fast and extend it to, say, 16 hours, for example. So you eat everything within an 8-hour window, and that's called a 16-8. It's very popular, and that's done most days of the week. Another sort of popular sort of thing is to go to almost a 23 or 24-hour fast, which is a sort of 1 meal a day sort of idea. So if you go from lunch to lunch or dinner to dinner, that's about 23 hours, 24 hours in between the meals. The point is that you're only storing food energy for 1 hour of the day, and the other 23 hours, you're going to allow your body to essentially digest or burn off that sugar. And that's also a very powerful way to get your blood sugars down and lose weight. Then you can go longer and longer. So those are sort of the most popular sort of regimens. And certainly for older people, we would encourage people to use sort of a shorter fast. So the difference between fasting that was done sort of in the 70s, which actually had a few problems, was that they were doing these super long fasts, like 30, 60 days at a time, as opposed to, say, 24 hours, which is really just sort of dinner to dinner. You're still eating once a day. But you certainly can go longer if you want. But as you go longer, there's more power, but then there's also more risk. So you have to be more careful, for example, if you're on medications, if you're older, if you have any concerns about malnutrition or underweight, then you have to be a little bit more careful. But those are always options. You can go 3 days, 5 days without food. It's okay. The average weight loss, the actual fat loss, is actually only half a pound of fat per day of fasting. So you have to decide what you're going to do and why. And that's where having some guidance might be very helpful. So our program, for example, offers some guidance, but most people would do very well to start with some of the shorter fasts and then sort of dabble in with some of the longer fasts. And that's sort of the most important rule, the 2 most important rules of fasting, really. One is always be safe. So you want to make sure you speak to your doctor, you know what you're doing. And if at any time you don't feel well, you stop. So always be safe. That's number one. And the other one that's really important is to fit it into your life. Because if you start doing a fasting schedule that really doesn't go along with your lifestyle, that's not going to last. So I had one fellow one time, he used to go out with his friends and have lunch, and he'd stop doing that to do the fast. I'm like, no. That's not the way it works. You do what you normally do, and you fit all the stuff, all the fasting around that. Because otherwise, if you cut yourself off from all your friends, you're not going to like it, and you're going to stop doing it. So it's not viable in the long term.
Wise words, as usual, from Dr. Fung. So, how to start fasting? First, stick to only 3 meals a day and no snacking. That is really important. Second, try reducing your eating window, having your last meal by 7 p.m. and then have brunch at 11. If we only have lunch and dinner, the effect's reduced even further. And of course, you might try some days having just one good meal, either lunch or dinner, so going 24 hours without food. You'll be surprised how much easier this is to do than you might imagine. You should still drink plenty of water and potentially take some salt as well, because you could be losing salt. You could have the odd cup of black tea or coffee. If you want to do it, consider doing it on a day when you know you're going to be busy, so you'll have less time to think about the fact that you aren't eating. You may feel hungry at some point, but usually if you have a glass of water, go out and do something, get up and move about, maybe go out for a walk, that moment generally passes. So now I want to talk about vegetable oils. Up till now, we've mainly focused on the low-carb aspect of this course, but I want to go back to the issue of vegetable oils. As you know from Dr. Unwin's diet sheet, which is in the resources available on our website, he advises avoiding vegetable oils. I've shown you this diagram before, briefly explaining how they produce vegetable oils. The process involves cleaning the seeds, grinding them, pressing, and extracting the oil from them. In extracting, a volatile hydrocarbon such as hexane is used as a solvent. The seeds are then heated, which causes them to oxidize. In other words, it makes them rancid. After extracting, the oil is refined, mixed with an alkaline substance, and washed in a centrifuge. Further washing and refining follows, including deodorizing to remove the taint of rancidity that they caused at the beginning of the process, and bleaching to make them a lovely golden colour. And then the oil's filtered and or distilled, ready for packaging. I think that should be enough to put anyone off from wanting to consume them for a start. But we're going to go back a bit and look at the history of these products because it's quite interesting. Back in the 19th century, oil from whales was what was mostly lubricating the factories in the new industrial revolution. But by the early 20th century, mostly due to overfishing, whale oil became scarce. However, in the US, there was a byproduct of the cotton industry. Cotton seeds. These were toxic, but it was discovered that they could extract the oil and use it for engines. Then petroleum was discovered and started to take over for machinery because it was much cheaper. All you had to do basically was dig a hole in the ground and out came the oil. You didn't have to process seeds to produce oil. So it was much cheaper, and therefore they needed to find an outlet for the cottonseed oil, which was no longer required by industry. These oils were highly unstable and went rancid very quickly. But scientists then discovered how to stabilize them, so they became solid and could then be sold as soap. One of the biggest names in the field was Procter & Gamble, and many of you may be familiar with the name still, as it was on many packets of washing powder and other household products, and still they own many of the household brands today. Then some bright spark at Procter & Gamble thought this white solid soap looked rather like lard. So they did some more work on removing toxins and finally introduced this solidified cottonseed oil as a substitute for lard. And it was marketed in the US as Crisco. And indeed, you'll still find Crisco on sale in the States today. Then, of course, they added a bit of yellow colouring, and lo and behold, they had a butter substitute. They did some clever advertising to convince the American woman that this was the modern way. There were a lot of immigrants from all over the world seeking to better themselves in the States around this time. So the marketing went straight to the core of their aspirations. You don't have to slave over the butter churn anymore. You can use our wonderful new butter substitute. Procter & Gamble then contacted the emerging American Heart Association, which at the time was just a small group of cardiologists. Heart disease was almost unknown in the 19th century and was only just starting to appear. And an influential scientist, Ansel Keys, had produced a famous study, the 7-country study that some of you may have heard about, and come up with the hypothesis that high cholesterol resulted in heart disease. His research was highly flawed and there was no evidence to support it, but Keys had a very loud voice. So Procter & Gamble held a radio lottery competition and raised a large sum of money, the equivalent of several million dollars, that they then donated to the American Heart Association in 1948. They convinced them that these new vegetable oils were the answer to heart disease because they were polyunsaturated and not saturated and would therefore lower cholesterol. And by 1961, the first dietary advice was issued to limit saturated fats. So now Procter & Gamble and other producers had all the doctors and cardiologists advising their patients to change to eating polyunsaturated fats, that is oils and margarines, and in the process, lining their pockets. Money from the lottery well spent, you might conclude. Throughout the 60s and 70s, lots of trials were done, and whilst it was found, and is true, that polyunsaturated fats reduce cholesterol, there was no effect on cardiovascular mortality. That is, you were no more or less likely to die of heart disease if you lowered your cholesterol. Here it says some of the hard endpoints. On altogether, they tested over 75,000 men and women in experiments lasting up to 12 years. And as I say, the results were that there was no effect of saturated fats on heart disease. Removing it or not didn't make any difference. However, what wasn't publicised was that in several of these studies, whilst there was no effect on cardiovascular disease, those consuming the polyunsaturated oils had far greater incidence of cancer. No one could quite decide whether it was the oils themselves that were causing the cancer or the fact that they were lowering the cholesterol was the issue. But they were so convinced that the most important thing was lowering cholesterol for heart disease, despite the fact that their own research demonstrated it made no difference, that these other findings were ignored and the advice continued to be reduce saturated fat. They even went so far as to issue a notice that the overriding issue was reducing heart disease, so lowering cholesterol was the most important thing, even though, as we say, there was no evidence to that effect. They followed up in 1990 with a further meeting about cancer, but they still couldn't agree about the reasons, whether it was the oil or whether it was the lowering of the cholesterol, and therefore they just decided there was no point in meeting any more about it, but they didn't actually come to any conclusions or find any answers. In 1972, teams of food chemists from Japan reported that heating soybean oil produced compounds that were highly toxic to mice. Columbia University's study on rats fed mildly oxidized oils, and the rats suffered liver damage and heart lesions compared to rats that were fed tallow, lard, dairy fats, etc., which showed no such damage. Throughout the 40s and 50s and on into the 1990s and early 2000s, there were numerous animal studies that showed serious ill effects of consuming vegetable oils. And in 1972, there were studies showing various ill effects on rats and mice. Whilst Nina Teicholz was researching her book, The Big Fat Surprise, in the early 2000s, one of the oil executives, that's food oils, not petroleum, contacted her and asked if she knew about the problems in the fast food industry. Once trans fats had been banned, which they had to do, as I say, early in the 2000s, they had to turn to the other vegetable oils. And it turns out that the oils polymerize and become like shellac. If you don't know what shellac is, it's a hard resinous substance used in French polishing. This substance then coats the machinery, the floors, and the uniforms of the staff. They had to invent new, extremely strong chemicals to degrease the surfaces because normal ones wouldn't touch it. And they even had problems with uniforms being sent to the laundry and auto-combusting, i.e. bursting into flames. I don't know how many of you know, but McDonald's originally fried their chips or French fries in beef fat. And it was only when beef fat was demonized as saturated fat that they turned to vegetable oils. So what about the effect on the people who consume these oils when heated, especially when they're heated repeatedly, as of course they are in restaurants and takeaways? Numerous toxic substances are produced, amongst them aldehydes. A researcher called Hermann Esterbauer found that aldehydes are extremely chemically reactive, cause rapid cell death, interfere with DNA and RNA, and disturb basic cell functioning. They cause extreme oxidative stress to every possible kind of tissue, with a great diversity of deleterious effects to health, all of which were rather likely to occur at levels normally consumed by humans. This next piece of research that you can see in the slide is from a very recent study done by one of the leading researchers into aldehydes in food. And this is just one of the toxic substances produced when you eat vegetable oils. And again, it outlines the serious effects on the cells of the consumption of vegetable oils. It says here it's clear that HNE is produced during the heating process of the frying oils and is incorporated into French fries. Frequently consumed foods containing considerable amounts of HNE, a toxic aldehyde, may be a public health concern since HNE toxicity is related to a number of common pathological conditions or illnesses. There are several problems with industrial seed oils. Eating industrial seed oils raises our omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratios with significant consequences for our health. If you remember, we're advised to eat oily fish like mackerel and salmon because of its healthy omega-3 fats. And as I say, too many omega-6 fats is dangerous for us. Industrial seed oils are unstable and oxidize easily, i.e. they go off. They contain harmful additives. And when industrial seed oils are repeatedly heated, even more toxic byproducts are created. So which oil should you use? Well, ideally, you shouldn't use any oil for frying. You should use a solid fat, butter, lard, dripping, coconut oil, which is solid at room temperature, except in the middle of a very hot summer. Olive oil may be okay for frying at low temperatures, but not at high. So you could use coconut oil for stir fries, for example. For salads, things like extra virgin olive oil and avocado are fine. In particular, it's best to avoid oils containing high levels of linoleic acid, which in this table are shown in blue. So as you can see, soybean oil and corn oil in particular are really high, and sunflower and rapeseed, here called canola oil, are also pretty high. And these are the oils that you find in the majority of processed foods. Hence, another reason for removing processed foods or ultra-processed foods from our diets. Dr. Chris Nobia, an American ophthalmologist, gave a talk a year or so ago and produced some very interesting data. The rise of serious diseases like heart disease, cancer, dementia, type 2 diabetes, and a range of autoimmune diseases can be mapped onto the rise of the consumption of vegetable oils. You can see from this chart how the levels of omega-6 fats have increased exponentially in our diet. These figures are for the US, but the levels are very similar in the UK. As you can see, in 1865, which was pretty much only at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and certainly before the introduction of vegetable oils, most people consumed beef, pork, chicken, and used beef and pork, chicken fat, which of course was mostly pasture raised. It wasn't raised in industrial animal lots. And the amount of omega-6 in the diet of the average American was about 2.2 grams. By 1909, however, soybean and cottonseed oil, we talked about cottonseed oil being turned from an engine oil into human oil, they'd been introduced, and the quantity in the diet had almost doubled to 5 grams a day. By 1999, vegetable oils, including corn oil and rapeseed oil, had been introduced and were the oils mainly consumed by most people. And the level of omega-6 in the diet of the average American had gone up to 18 grams. And by 2008, so not a lot later, what's that, 10 years later, the wider distribution of processed foods containing vegetable oils means that the average American is eating 29 grams a day. That's equivalent to 11% of their calories in omega-6 fats. And we look back to 1865, it was 2.2, and it's now 29. And as I say, this applies to the UK as well. Given that the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in our diet should only be about 2 to 1, you can see that consuming this amount of highly inflammatory omega-6 fats is damaging our bodies in numerous ways. A doctor called Sir William Osler, who co-founded the famous Johns Hopkins Medical School in the States, wrote that between 1876 and 1897, he'd seen just 6 cases of angina, and he didn't even mention heart attacks because he'd never seen one. Where people did die of heart disease, this was as a result generally of syphilis or rheumatoid arthritis, both of which can lead to heart disease. But this is very different from the arterial heart disease, which we associate with heart attacks and strokes nowadays. Between 1897 and 1910, the number of cases of angina rose to 208, but still no heart attacks. Yet by the 1930s, heart disease was the leading cause of death, and now accounts for 32% of all deaths. Another researcher in Blackburn in the UK, of all places, found similar patterns. Between 1900 and 1910, there were no heart attacks. By 1920, it was still rare, yet between 1922 and 27, the numbers doubled, and again between 27 and 29, they doubled. And again between then and 1933, they doubled again, and so on, until by 1970, 550 deaths per 100,000 were due to heart attacks. Similarly, cancers. When researchers looked at remote populations such as the Masai Mara or the Inuit, they found no incidence of cancer or heart disease. Others working with remote tribes in various locations, including Africa and South America, found the same thing. Populations that were remote and ate their own ancestral diets had no or minimal incidence of these diseases, even into the 1970s. In some populations, they ate mainly animal products. The Inuit, for example, who eat meat and fish, and the Maasai, who eat meat and drink blood and milk, whilst other forest-dwelling populations ate a largely plant-based diet. Yet if any of them moved to more populated areas where Western foods penetrated, such as port areas, those same people then developed the Western diseases. This removes any possibility that this is a result of genetics. It can be argued that smoking increased heart disease, as indeed it did, but smoking rates in both the US and the UK have dropped dramatically in recent years, yet heart disease continues to increase. I hope this has given you a deeper understanding of just why you should try and cut out vegetable oils from your diet. And be aware if that you eat out, of course, they will almost certainly use vegetable oils. I've taken to asking for my salad rather than chips and asking to have just olive oil for it, not whatever dressing they use, which may often have both vegetable oils and sugar in them. It's never been a problem. A steak or a burger without the bun are fairly safe options, as these are usually simply griddled. And don't be afraid to ask what they're using to fry something in. If, for instance, you want an omelette and they're using vegetable oil, ask if they'll fry it in butter instead. Most kitchens will have butter in it. So next time, we're going to talk about low-carbon dementia, a very important point, ADHD, migraines, arthritis, and other inflammatory conditions, of which there are many. So for today, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you at the next session. Goodbye.